Hello again and welcome again. In this last section of the presentation, what I want to talk about is the ways in which in the final phases of processes in post-conflict environments, the issue of historical memory and the interpretation and understanding of the past becomes more contentious, and the shape of this contention, how it looks, and what are some ways forward through that. So here's what we can say generally about public memory. First, as space grows between the time in which violence was committed, as this experience recedes further into the past, public memory becomes more important, and disputes over public memory become more intense, become more polarized, and public memory becomes more of an object of contestation. And this is partly because the ways in which people express contesting and conflicting truths about the period of violence comes to resonate less with the lived experience of people in the community and more with the ideological goals of states and societies, and ideological goals related to political projects that are current in these states and societies. And what this means is that violence takes on an unusual role in the context of public memory. Violence comes to constitute, for many new states especially, a portion of their founding myths, that is, a portion of the story of their formation and their legitimacy, which becomes to some degree untouchable. But at the same time, violence functions as a source of stigma for political communities and elites. The founding myth may be glorious, but it is also discrediting and painful and potentially dangerous for elites in political power. Now, this is a question that is less settled in the context of the states of the former Yugoslavia than in some other contexts, because the wars of the 1990s did not end with military defeat for any of the parties involved, but rather with negotiated resolutions that distributed some benefits to each of the belligerent elites that were participating in the conflict. Some analysts use terms like frozen conflicts to describe the indeterminate situation that results from this. So it's possible that we could say, in the same way that in the famous phrase from Clausewitz, that war is politics by other means, we can say that the communication of ideas and of symbols and of images and of understandings of the past might be thought of as war by other means. What are some of the contexts in which this contestation and conflict occurs? Some of the most important ones that have been important, I mean, in recent political experience and in research as well, have to do with public sites in which the issue of public memory becomes important. One is in the way in which history is taught in schools. We can think of school textbooks in history as interventions into culture, as ways in which tendentious understandings of the past, and in particular the recent past, become institutionalized. And we can see this in the difference between ways that history is taught in state-sanctioned schools in different communities in the region. So, for example, if we want to talk about Bosnia and Herzegovina, where history is taught separately under separate curricula for members of the different ethnic and national groups. One of the places where attention has been most important is in talking about events like the genocide in Srebrenica, which in the text given to Bosniak school students is described as a formative event for the experience of the public, as a crime of enormity that is fundamental to national identity. Whereas in the textbooks that are given to the ethnically Serb students in schools, it is either not mentioned or in some ways contested. Numbers are contested, the character of the crime, and the question of whether it is genocide or another type of crime is opened up. Doubt is raised about it. So this is one of the places where conflicting understandings of the past are mobilized to in the struggle over control of the consciousness as it develops in young people. A second place where we can see memory struggles taking place is in the use of public space for the commemoration of memory, in particular through the creation of memorials to victims, of which there have been many, and there have been proliferating both public and private memorials. But something interesting has been happening with memorials. Not only have they been proliferating, but in some instances where memorials have been built, counter memorials are built near them. Counter memorials that are meant to show that the group of victims that is commemorated in the first memorial was a group of perpetrators toward another group. Or a similar phenomenon is what we might call stochastic memorials, that is broadening the context of crimes, so that this is something that was visible in Serbia, in which a proposal to commemorate the victims of crimes committed by Serb military and paramilitary forces in the conflicts of the 1990s was contested by a proposal for a counter memorial to veterans and to military victims fighting on the side of those same forces in those wars. And then the proposal was broadened so that eventually the proposal was for a memorial to all victims of all conflicts that have occurred in human history. So memorialization is an object of intense dispute. What does some of the research on memorials and memorialization and public memory tell us about those disputes? Let me offer you just a couple of perspectives. One of them comes from Azra Hromajic, whose work we have encountered before, who talks about ignoring crimes of the past merging together with ignoring crimes of the present in a process that she has labeled immoral democratization. That is, that the expanding demand for democratic participation comes permanently into collision with legacies of illegality from the past and from the recent past, and with normalized illegality, official corruption, and so on in the present. A similar approach is taken in understandings of the past that were investigated by Jelena Obradović-Vochnik in her study of the ways in which people remember conflict. And one of the arguments that she makes, she says, since public institutions have largely abdicated their role in promoting understanding of the conflict, this has not eliminated the need for understanding. But this understanding is sought not in public conversations, but in private conversations, the conversations that occur in the context of friend and family. And so this goal of coming to terms with the past that has been postulated from so many political positions, you can't say that people are not coming to terms with the past. They are. But they're doing it in the context of interpersonal communications and understandings that have their own character among individuals involved in those conversations, that mean that understanding is taking shape, but it is not mechanistic and it is not predictable in the way that classic theory would have it. And then finally, on the related to the question of memorialization and monuments and different types of monuments, there is a whole generation of research by historians, mostly people like Jelena Đuriinović or Sven Mikulić, Vjeran Pavlaković, who talk about the use of symbolic representations of the past, monuments and historical texts and images and instruction, and follow the process of the ways in which pasts are reconstructed entirely in order to conform with political narratives that are contemporary. It might be possible to say that out of all of this, there is something ironic about the character of memory struggles. One is that although you would expect struggles to become less intense over time and consensus to develop over time, the opposite thing seems to be happening. They are probably more polarized now than they were at the time when violence was occurring, and that this polarization is happening at the same time that in cultural life and economic life, in non-political spheres, the level of contact is constantly increasing. We take these phenomena together, what we might be able to characterize the present as is a period of lack of resolution, of an extended transition that seems infinite, which is not sustainable, of goals that were postulated at the end of the period of violence, once again receding infinitely into the future so that they appear to be unattainable, whether they're in fact unattainable or not. What this means, and this will be my sort of up in the air conclusion, is that we'll have to be following disputes over public memory for a very long time and see how they develop and whether any of the initiatives that we've talked about in the previous sections will have any meaning. I look forward to discussing all of these questions with you in our seminar.